Hi there, my name is Vicki Pruner,
And I'm Mark Pruner.
and together we are Baker and Barrister. I'm a cottage food operator.
I am the helper in a cottage food business.
Together we've prepared a presentation for you that will help you if you have in mind to start a home baking business. And we hope that we will be able to answer a lot of the questions you may have and clear up any confusion that you may have garnered up until this point. So what's going to happen now is we're going to show you a slide presentation, and we will narrate throughout the presentation, and we will have a short closing and information on how you can contact us if you have any follow-up questions regarding the presentation. So with that, I guess we can go.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so here we go. Here, Mark and I are indicating what it is we do at Baker and Barrister. We help provide information to those people who want to start a home baking business. Now, the presentation that we offer to you today is starting a home baking business. That's the title. But really, what we're talking about is starting a business.
Yes, starting a business. When we started, the thought was Vicki runs a cake business, so cakes and designs and who we're going to be purchasing the cakes, and we already had kind of a little bit of a group of folks that said, when are you going to start? When are you going to start? And we weren't focused really on the business side. We weren't focused on the home side, but we quickly got acclimated. So part of this is kind of walking through some of the stops and starts that we went through, sharing those, and hopefully save you from some of those lessons that we went through.
So as I mentioned in the opening, I am a home baker. I'm licensed in the state of California. We have 58 counties in the state of California, and I'm registered in one of those counties. The presentation that we have today is based largely on my own personal experiences, but a lot of those same experiences you will have, but they will not be exactly the same. I can almost guarantee it, because there's so many variations of law from state to state, and within each state, the jurisdiction or county that oversees the program. And for those of you who are my international friends who might be listening in, even though we're focusing on the laws in the United States, some of these very same laws and steps that we suggest will apply to you. So I think you'll get some good information from this that will help you in starting your home business.
I'm an attorney licensed in the state of California. I've been in practice for over 35 years. I've represented businesses that range from part-time, single person, just getting started businesses and watch them grow, to large companies with activities all across the country. I've had a chance to see how different folks in different styles work with employees, work with marketing, work with their accounting, putting it all together, making it all work. I've had a ringside seat sometimes in the ring, and I would try to share some of those experiences with you as you go forward. It's important to note that because I'm a lawyer and I can't see folks on the other side, I can't meet with them, I can't learn their individual circumstances. What I'm giving today, what we're both giving, is general information, not legal advice. Our information is intended for general purposes only. If you desire legal advice on anything that's shared here, please consult with an active and licensed attorney in your particular jurisdiction.
So today's presentation is going to focus on 3 different areas. We're going to go through an exercise that I did well over 5 years ago, where I asked myself the question, why? Why do I want to have a home baking business? And this is going to be important to you as you develop your business, because there are going to be times where you become confused or frustrated or just downright tired, and you wonder, why in the heck am I doing this? But when you go back and reflect upon why, I think it's helpful, and I know it's helped me carry me through some difficult and challenging times. After we talk about the why and go through that exercise, we'll talk about understanding regulations and law that apply to you and where you live and where you plan to operate your business. And then we'll offer some tips on administering your business that we think are going to be helpful. So now why? Why is it you want to have a home baking business? If I were to list all of the things that would answer that question for me, it would be on this page here. First and foremost is income. Of course you want to get paid for what you do. You also want to be legal when you do it, because if you're selling out there and you don't have a license, you're in violation of the law. So you don't want to set yourself up for the huge liability of that. So for me, I wanted to be legal and sell my product the right way. I also get a lot of personal fulfillment from the things that I bake and create. I love to give to people. I love the accolades and the kind words that I get in exchange for that, and I love to create. So it allows me a great sense of fulfillment when I run my baking business. Also, because this is a part-time business for me, it's a side business, and I hope to carry it into the time period of my life when I am in retirement. I want to keep my mind and body busy doing something, and having a baking business I think will do that, because as you well know, you have to be exercising your mind throughout the whole baking process, and of course you're always busy and standing up, and you're not sedentary. Also, I learned pretty much after I got going that there are huge tax benefits in lowering your tax liability when you have a business. So that was really a nice sort of added cherry on top, so to speak, for me. Now, if I were to look at my list and decide which ones are the ones that are going to carry me through, these are the items in blue. Now, of course, income is nice. I don't need the income to put food on the table and to pay my bills. Fortunately, I am blessed that way. But these other items really are the things that carry me through and make it all worthwhile. And I constantly go back to this list and remind myself, because there have been some challenging times. And as my husband will attest, every night, pretty much, I am on social media and I'm browsing through the many sites that are focused on cottage food and home baking sites. And I can tell you, without fail, every day I find a posting similar to this that just popped up after I changed the names and that sort of thing. It popped up just a couple of days ago, and this is very common. Hi bakers, I'm ready to get my home baking permit. Yay, because she's so excited. I live in the big city. What do I do first? I am so lost. And I'm surprised by a statement like that, because I would think if you're ready to get your permit, you've already done a little bit of research. In this particular post, I was also surprised that somebody responded in a very similar way. They say, hey, that's a great question. I'm wondering if someone in my city can help me get started. Can anyone help? And the one thing I find somewhat astonishing is that there's always somebody who says, I am so glad I've got my friends on social media to answer all my questions. And while we are all well-meaning and we all want to help one another with our advice, just a word of caution that no matter what you get on social media, some of it is going to be very accurate and very appropriate, but the bottom line is that your government entity that administers your permit, they have the final say on everything, not your friends on social media. So just a word of caution there. So now that we've gone through that and addressed the question of why, we're going to now move on to understanding the regulations and the laws that apply. Now, first of all, what do you do? Where do you find this information? I suggest you do a search. So go to your search window and type in something like this: home baking business, Ohio, Dayton, wherever you happen to be. It can be a city or a state, and you're going to get some search results. If home baking business doesn't do it for you, you can select some of these other words. These are words that are commonly used for home baking businesses that are sanctioned by a government entity throughout the country. Not everyone uses cottage food. They may use domestic kitchen, home caterer, or home kitchen or home bakery. So after you do some search, you're going to get some results. And I know this is small, it's not intended for you to read it per se, but this is typically what you're going to find in your search results. What you want to look for is an entity that ends in .gov. So your URL that is provided, it should have .gov, because chances are that is the one entity that is going to oversee that law for that location for which you put in a search. And there's another way, and I'm going to hand this over to Mark so he can explain this important document.
Thank you, Vicki. One of the documents that we found really helpful in seeing what's out there in the country is a publication put together by Harvard Law School and their food law and policy clinic. You'll see a graphic of the front page there on the screen. In case you can't read it, the document's titled Cottage Food Laws in the United States, in typical lawyer fashion, descriptive but a little bit dry. Take a look at that document. You can search for it by typing in Harvard Law School Cottage Food, or go to the web address there on the screen, chlpi.org, and you'll go right to it. This publication has a survey of every single state's cottage food laws, and you'll see at a quick glance the key features of your particular state. Now, I said nearly every. There's one state that's been a holdout, that's New Jersey. And if you live in New Jersey, up until perhaps this year, you'll kind of have you won't be able to operate as a cottage food operator. Good news is that the state has been working on some regulations, and the comment period for those regulations closed on June 19, 2020. So do a search if you're in New Jersey. Look for those regulations. Take and see if they're going to be helpful for what you envision. For the other states, go to your particular state. So we just somewhat randomly picked Arizona. This is what you'll see on the page, discussing a summary of Arizona's cottage food laws. They'll talk about the tiers, the different types of producers. Make sure you fit into the tier that you've got in mind. There will be a little discussion about the types of products. The states are different, but most states generally revolve around foods that where bacteria can't grow. That's not a clear standard, but generally that's how most of the lists and standards are focused. There'll be some limits on where you can and can't sell your foods. We'll talk about those in a minute. There'll be some inspection and registration requirements. Your state might have a sales limit. For example, in California, the maximum income, not net income, gross income, you can bring in your cottage food operations is $50,000 a year. Your state might be different. And there's requirements in labeling. If you package and sell to the public, there will be most likely labeling requirements. It's somewhat a fill in the blank, but you got to get the blanks correct. Let's for example, and you'll see a reference to, thank you, Vicki. You'll see some reference to the statutes and the websites that you can go to for more specific information. So this is a helpful one-stop shop that, in a very summary, fairly readable format, will walk you through the requirements of your state. Starting a business requires a number of things, and I'm going to turn it over to Vicki to provide more explanation.
Okay, kind of playing off of what Mark has talked about. When you compare one site to another, it could be one state to another state, or different county or government entities within a given state. There's so much variation, and that's why we would love to be able to send you a handout that applies to everybody in the United States of America on how to start a home baking business. But there's so much variation, and it's really hard to keep track of what's allowed and what's not allowed from one location to another. So for example, some states require licenses, and actually some states don't require licenses. Some will only allow you to sell at a farmer's market or a public event, or a church event, for example, or a bake sale. Some allow you to sell via the internet, but not ship through the mail, where others do. And some will have limits on your annual gross revenue, or they will have no limits at all. So, as I said, every state is different, every jurisdiction is different. For example, we mentioned California. There are 58 counties in California. So there's one state law that applies throughout the state, but each county has the responsibility to develop its own regulations with regard to that law. And they do vary from one site to another. And if you think about it, the 58 entities within the state of California, those are people like you and me. They have varying levels of experience. Maybe some are bakers, and maybe some are not. So they're trying to tell you and what you can and cannot do, and sometimes it's things get lost in interpretation. So it can be a confusing situation. So if we were to look at the cottage food operation, you've made that decision, you're going to get your permit. This is what typically you're going to have to do. You're going to have to complete an application for your area of jurisdiction and pay a fee. Now, my fee for where I am is just over $300. And when I renew that every year, I have to pay that amount again. Now, if I were, I'm a little bit unusual in California in that there's a two-tiered system. If I wanted to sell my product through a retailer or through a restaurant, I would have to pay and get a different classification of permit and pay an additional fee, because that helps cover the cost of the required inspection of my kitchen. I also have to complete a self-certification form where I'm certifying that I understand what the rules and regulations are, that I'm going to abide by them, I'm going to keep my kitchen clean, I'm going to keep my pets out of the kitchen and young children out of the kitchen when I'm working, and that sort of thing. I'm also required to have a food handler course and certificate. Typically about $50 is the cost to take the course online and to get your certificate. And you provide a copy of that to your local government entity. And you have to renew it every 3 years. Now, not every state requires labeling of your product, but many do, and there are certain criteria that you have to incorporate when you design your labels and for your food packaging. And I know in the state of California and my county, they give very clear direction on what is supposed to be on the label, including the size of the font and that sort of thing. I have food and ingredient limitations. I'd love to be able to use some of the types of frostings and icings that I would love to use, and my fruit fillings and that sort of thing, but many of them are prohibited. So you have to understand what is allowed and what is acceptable and stay within those limits. You could also have some reporting requirements. I know I have to report quarterly to my county with my water testing. So for example, I have a private well and I don't have a municipal water system where I live, and because of that I have to get my water tested. I just turned in my sampling for the current quarter just yesterday, and every year I have put in about $200 for my water testing. There's an annual test and a quarterly test, as well as a 5-year test. So you have to understand what all is entailed. Also, because I do have a well, I have to pay $180 a year to keep that registration current for that well. So again, your site might be a little bit different. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Mark, and he's going to be talking about some other legal business requirements.
Thank you, Vicki. Just as you create a cake or a baked item, maybe something that's uniquely yours, choosing a name for your business falls within that same category. Some people are just incredibly creative with the name that they choose for their business. So the first decision is whether you want to use your own name, either as a standalone or incorporated in the name of your business, like Susie Baker Confections, for example, if your name is Susie and your last name's Baker. Or some people say Bountiful Creations. That might be a name that you would want to use, which is a fictitious name. So if you have your own name as part of the business name, you do not have to, there's no filing requirement to be able to legally create and use that name. However, if you create a name that does not include your name, Bountiful Cakes or anything of that nature, that fictitious name should be registered in your county or local jurisdiction. After you choose your name, and I suggest that when you go about that process, talk to your friends, talk to people that might be intending to purchase your product, do a little focus group of folks, bouncing your proposed names off of them and get some of their feedback. Frankly, that has a little bit of the effect of building anticipation of your business and can get a little stimulation going that way, which is, of course, great stuff. And you get buy-in, and people feel like they're contributing to your business and your new venture. When you settle on a name, be sure to go to your local jurisdiction's website, where a searchable list of fictitious business names should be available. You can use your own mobile device or computer. You're going to type in the search box the name of your jurisdiction and the words fictitious business name search, and a place where you can search for free should pop up. Type in your name that you want to use. Make sure nobody has used that name. If they have, then the name you've chosen is not available. Many people go through the search process as they're looking at names. So if they come across a name they like, or it pops into their head at 2 a.m. and they write it down, they search and they find out right away if that name's even possible. So once you settle on your name, if it's a fictitious name, you've done your search. You're going to then need to fill out a form. In our jurisdiction, it costs about $55. You got to renew that every 5 years, and you're going to have to publish of that form in a newspaper that costs about another $50. The newspapers do this all the time, and they've got forms you fill out to make it very easy. Once you go through that process, you've got a unique name, you filed with the county, you've published it, boom, that is your name. Legally, that's the name nobody else can use. Then you're going to want to check on the zoning requirements. Now, some states have different zoning limitations, so even though this is a home business and the laws are written that way, some states might have requirements that require you to fill out an application or a notice to let the zoning folks know that you've got a home business operating out of your home. This shouldn't be too burdensome, but it's an important point to check on and not to miss. Most of the time, you should be able to call your local zoning or land use authority and ask them a question. They should be able to tell you over the phone. One of the last steps you're going to want to take is to get a business license. Another small fee, relatively small, but over $100, $140 is what we have to pay. The business license is the government's official allowance to operate your business. There might be some requirements you have to go through, some check the boxes, which are actually quite helpful because they guide you and helping you to make sure you've done all the little things you need to do to actually get that license besides write your check. Here are some other things to think about that aren't exactly mandatory, but we found talking to people in our own experience to be very helpful practices. First, look at setting up a separate bank account. Why a separate bank account? You don't have to do this. You can to put deposits into your regular checking account, one you use for regular household purposes. You can write checks out of that account for your expenses. But at the end of the day, at the end of the year or other accounting period, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, perhaps a lot more difficult, separating out what income you've generated, what expenses you've paid, to try to figure out what you might want to do different in your business as you go forward. So having a separate accounting, a separate bank account is a very, very helpful step to take. A question that comes up with some regularity is, what about insurance? Do I need insurance? I would say the answer is yes. Insurance doesn't cost too much. We found insurance as low as $299, $300. And insurance is your best and most reliable line of defense in case any bad stuff happens. So you can work through an existing agent. There's some online policies that are available for folks that specialize in home business, cottage food operations. But ask your agent, look around, do a little bit of research, and I would suggest you definitely take out a policy of insurance.
And this is Vicki. I just want to add that I have been asked on a number of occasions if I have liability insurance from some of my clients. And for some venues, such as wedding venues and that sort of thing, if you're going to be providing food for that event, they want proof that you do have liability insurance. And so I've had to show that. So I keep this policy for myself and I renew it every year. And it does come in handy, as well as knowing that I do have some protections.
Thank you, Vicki. Another question we've heard is, what about a company? Do I need to form a corporation? Do I need to form an LLC? What do I need to do in that regard? My answer is, it's completely legal for you to form a corporation, completely legal to set up an LLC. But for most small businesses, like the cottage food business, the paperwork and the expense that go along with setting up the separate company make that just not a great option. The real question that folks generally are asking is that, what if somebody sues me? I don't want to lose my house. And the answer is that an LLC or a corporation may protect you. In my experience, if somebody really wants to make a big-time case, they're always going to name you individually anyway, so that leaves the insurance policy every day of the week as your best line of defense. That insurance policy is just hyper important and, frankly, much less expensive than paying the fees and running through the paperwork for an LLC or a corporation. Another question that comes up is, do I need a federal tax identification number? The answer is, you don't. If you're a sole proprietor, you do not have to have a tax ID number. Like if you're a company or an LLC, you definitely do. But like the separate bank account, it's a good idea because that number is attached to your bank account, separately attached to the Schedule C or other tax filings that you may need to make, and it separates out your business. It helps with the running of the business as a separate entity and protects you in case there's a challenge that somebody wants to argue with you whether you're proper, that you've expended money out for your business, claiming that maybe that was a personal expense. The tax ID can be obtained through the IRS. The form is SS4, actually SS-4. You can find the form on the IRS website, which is irs.gov. Look down, there's a forms search function on that site. Type in SS4 and the form will pop up. You can fill it out on the screen. Some simple questions, name, address, a little bit about the business as you want it to be will be asked. You mail it in, or you could call. There's a special number you can call in and get your tax number right away. You may think, wow, do I need a bookkeeper? Well, generally not. Your bookkeeper is likely going to be you. You're going to want to keep track of your income. Those are sales, people that pay you money. And you're going to want to keep track of your expenses, which can be a little tricky We'll get to that in a second. We have a list of typical expenses that we can kind of walk through. The biggest one is, how do I allocate from that bag of flour that I use some to make a cake that I sold and some flour and maybe fixing dinner or doing something for the family? The answer is, if you have a reasonable estimate of how many cups or what percent of that bag of flour that you used, and that's allocated to the business and written down for that week or that month, your bookkeeping is in fairly good order. Some people may want to keep all of their supplies, maybe even some of their equipment that they use in their home baking business, in a separate cupboard. Really, that's very advisable. You want to try to do the least amount of commingling that you can for clear record-keeping purposes. And really, at the end of the day, you're going to want to know, how successful is this business? Another question is, how much do I need to think about getting a CPA or tax advisor? Well, most programs, tax preparation programs, will run you through questions and forms that are designed specifically for small businesses. Small tax preparers also have, for reasonable fees, help in filling out those forms if you have somebody that you go to help you with your tax return. I don't advise a separate CPA just for setting up the business, but rather incorporating the CPA or the bookkeeper or the tax service or the tax accounting software into your normal routine. Generally, that will work the best. I know that for us, a person that helps us in our CPA in my own business has been more than worth any money that we've paid that CPA and the suggestions that he's given us. So that part has been helpful, but it's been part of our normal routine, and part of we just sort of fold it into our regular lives. Business expenses. You'll see a list there on the right-hand side. Of course, we talked about ingredients a little bit. Our recommendation is to keep the ingredients used in the business separate. It's physically separated actually is the preferred way to go. Don't forget on supplies. Don't forget that paper and pens and maybe Post-its and other things that you might use in your business, maybe books, maybe recipe books, other things you buy just for the business or that you use primarily in the business. Those are legitimate business expenses. Mileage is a big one that people forget. You can get free apps for your smartphone. The IRS requires you to keep a simple record, the date and time when you leave, when you come back, the mileage to and from, off your odometer readings is the best way to go, and the purpose of your trip. Maybe it's delivery of a cake, maybe it's going to the grocery store to buy some ingredients. Any trip that's primarily, not exclusively, but primarily related to the business is deductible. And frankly, when your car is used to travel, your car becomes like a little income producer. Here's why. So if you go 10 miles to the grocery store and 10 miles back, that is a 20-mile round trip. And the current IRS rate of around 58 cents a mile, you're looking at round numbers, about $11 of tax deduction. And it's, unless you've got an incredibly expensive car to run, it's unlikely that you burn through $11 of gas to go through 20 miles. And so you've maybe spent $2, depends on the mileage of your car, maybe $3 or $4 of gas, but your deduction is $11. On the tax saving side, you've just made a little bit of extra money. So keep those records, keep them in order, use an app. That's what we find is best to do. But if you write them down, even in slips of paper, and put them in an envelope, just as long as you can put together a record at the end of the year, that'll satisfy the tax man's requirements. Don't forget training, going to conventions, classes, even the travel, going to classes and conventions. All of that is deductible. If you have an employee, if your state allows employees, those are legitimate expenses. We'll loop back to employees in just a little bit. There's a separate concern there. Don't forget advertising. If you have a website, domain name registration, those are all legitimate business expenses. And a hidden item that some people I think forget are utilities. So if you use electricity, which most people do, gas, other items of electricity, maybe a little part of your cell phone bill, as long as it's used in business and the deduction is reasonably related to your use of those utilities for your business, you're good to go. Use those as business expenses. Remember that this is not a hobby, this is a business. The IRS has what's called the hobby loss rule, and if you have a hobby, if they determine you have a hobby which is generally deemed to be an activity that loses money for more than 3 years in a row, they can disallow your deductions. Stated another way, you can lose money for a couple years, but on that third year, certainly by the fourth year, you need to be making some money. So these little items that we've run through, the record keeping and the tax number, the separate account, all of those little things, while they're not mandatory, if you get a challenge or a letter from the IRS or your local government authority and you're not able to show that you've got a separate business that looks like a business, smells like a business, if I may say that, and tastes like a business from their point of view on the paperwork side, you may run into some difficulty. All this is curable. Now about employees. The deal about employees is you want to find somebody who shares your vision, shares your passion, what you're trying to create, what you're all about. Not always easy to do, but it's worth the effort to find the right person. Treat that person, of course, as best as you can. And I found in my own experience, it's kind of a different skill to have employees that are working for you. You'll ask them to do extra things sometimes. Maybe things pop up. You'll need their help, and just find ways to make their experience helpful. Friends are not always the best employees. They can be, but just a word of caution in the employment department. And if you have employees, there's some forms that are going to have to be filled out. On the federal side, it's called a Form 941. It's filed every quarter. You fill it to how much money you pay, take out Social Security. The form leads you through the math. Just be aware that there's some extra expense beyond wages that come with employees. So let me turn it over to Vicki to kind of begin to wrap this up. And I have a couple of things I want to say. I'm going to ask her to help me remember to say at the end.
Thanks, dear. So we've gone through the three components that we talked about at the beginning. We've addressed the why, an exercise that I think is real important for you to go through when setting up your business and deciding if this is really what you want to do. And then understanding the regulations and the law and the complexity that goes along with that. And as we, I think, very clearly pointed out, there's so many variances from location to location. It's really hard to send out one guide that applies to all. So you really need to do your homework in this area. And there's some business administration tips that we've offered that will help you decide how you want to run your business and how you want to manage it. And it's important to set that up a little bit early. And we have a couple closing comments, and we'll turn the camera back over to us.
Thank you for joining us. It's been our pleasure to share with you some of our experiences and give you some of the information that we've discovered. We really believe that cottage food operators are a path forward, and it's a great new industry. It allows folks like us that have a passion for something, that just really enjoy doing a particular, in this case, baking, we can do it. We can see the joy it brings to people, and just kind of unexpectedly, it's kind of brought a lot of extra joy to our lives as well. We've got to do this together. I get to take direction from Vicki on how to drive, watch out for the bumps, and we've seen all those shows where the cake gets destroyed because of some driving issue. But that's been an experience, frankly, a good experience. We hope that you have got an experience ahead of you that's just like that, full of joy and happiness, and with many, many stories to tell. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much, and enjoy the conference and the other forms of education that are being offered, and good luck on your journey, and stay safe.
Stay safe. Thank you.